If you're playing fantasy or betting on Saturday, you need to see this. I've spent 5 hours researching this slate, and these are the players you must have and avoid. And let's start with Jonathan Taylor at $7,200, who, look, since Jeff Saturday took over as the head coach, it's been the Jonathan Taylor show. These are his averages with Saturday. In 4 games, 19.2 fantasy points, almost 3 receptions, and 21 rush attempts, so 24 touches per game. That's 53% more points than he had before Jeff Saturday took over. And since Nyheim Hines was traded to Buffalo, you're getting a lot more passing game usage. These are his targets. 4 targets and 3 receptions right here in 3 straight games is giving him a nice floor and massive ceiling. So the simple problem here is to play Jonathan Taylor, take his overs. He's probably the best running back on the slate for Saturday. And then there's J.K. Dobbins, who's affordable at $5,200 and just returned last week to a massive day, over 100 yards, finds the end zone, 20 plus fantasy points on DraftKings. And now he's facing the Browns' number 29 run defense at a very affordable $5,200. So we're easily playing this player, right? And not so fast. You see, Dobbins only saw 28 of 61 snaps. That's not even 50% of the snaps in this game, and he saw 15 carries. Gus Edwards saw 13 carries. 4 running backs and a mobile quarterback saw touches and saw volume in this game. So yeah, he had a great game, but most of it came on a 140-yard run. And as he gets healthier, there's a chance he can see more snaps, but it's still a crowded backfield, and he saw no targets. Not something he's really known for anyways. Lack of upside here with high ownership, it's an avoid. Now at the wide receiver position, what do we do with Jalen Waddle, who's $7,000 flat? In the last couple of games has not been good. Just 5 points and 2 points his last 3 games. Hasn't had a big game in over a month now. Well, him being the only $7,000 wide receiver and being $7,000 flat, so there's not a perceived value of being like $6,800, means that this talented wide receiver is definitely going to go under-owned. And let's not forget, Jalen Waddle is still seeing elite usage in terms of red zone targets with 8 and 14 deep targets this year. It gives him upside, and the dude is great. Top 10 in wide receiver efficiency, top 10 in yards after the catch, continues to beat man coverage. So this is a spot as his price point decreases to buy in on Jalen Waddle. And there's no reason to buy in on Justin Jefferson because, well, the man just keeps doing what he's doing. He was the highest scoring wide receiver last week, and that makes sense as he went over 10 catches and over 220 receiving yards. Now he'll be facing a pretty good Colts secondary that doesn't allow a lot of explosive plays, but that means Jefferson's probably going to see another 8 to 10 reception game, and if he's just going to pile up usage, well, we'll take that. But is Jefferson the best pay up option for us on the week? More on that in just a moment. Jonathan Taylor and Jefferson, we've talked about these guys, but they're expensive. So how do we afford them? You need to find value, and Isaiah McKenzie at $4,100, is he the answer for the value question? What you get here in McKenzie is a player who's seen his role increases. You can look at his snap percentage right here, but I'm more interested in his routes, his route rate. He's running a route 78%, 71%, and 70% of the time the last 3 weeks. That is fantastic. That means he's on the field seeing routes with Josh Allen in this offense. And look, outside of Stephon Diggs, every other player on this team is just going to be inconsistent because they all have their big week. Dawson Knox, Gabe Davis, Isaiah McKenzie. But if he's cheap and he's seeing usage, he's worth a flyer, especially in your Bills stacks. And another player who's worth consideration, let's discuss him. How much of a priority is he? Is David Njoku at $4,200 for the Browns. You see, he returned last week and played 68 of a possible 72 snaps off of injury. That's over 90% of the snaps, people. And this led to a quality game with Deshaun Watson for the first time of about 19 fantasy points, 8 targets. He looked really good, and now he faces the Ravens, who allow top 5 production to the tight end position. So Njoku is a quality play, but is he the best tight end? I want to discuss another guy in just a moment, but first we got to look at this value wide receiver because there's a good chance this might be the best play on the entire slate, and it's Michael Pittman, who is off the bye week, and the last time we saw him, it's not going to be encouraging. Just 3 fantasy points on 4 targets. It's going to mean he has lower ownership. But that was a difficult matchup, and now he's in a very good matchup versus a poor Vikings secondary. And so far this season with Matt Ryan, because he had a couple of games with Sam Ehlinger, but just the games with Matt Ryan, over 9 targets and about 15 fantasy points per game. That easily pays off his ridiculous price point in the 5K range. So play Michael Pittman, and there's even more values in this range to discuss. One of those guys is Donovan Peoples-Jones, who, look, we've been saying it. It's been written on the wall. Once Deshaun Watson comes back, this big athletic wide receiver who has all the speed and burst in the world, top 10% speed, top 1% of all time, 100th percentile burst. This dude is athletic. He can jump out of the gym. Yeah, once a good quarterback in Deshaun Watson who's actually accurate, unlike Jacoby Brissett, comes back, it's going to be fireworks. And that's what you got in just his second game with Watson, going for a career high 12 targets, a career high 114 yards, popped off for over 20 DraftKings points. Now, yet again this week, he's a quality play, although there are better 5K options. One in Michael Pittman and more to come. The 5K range, spoiler alert, is loaded at wide receiver. So there is Peoples-Jones. What about his quarterback, Deshaun Watson? Honestly, at $6,300, $6,300, it's a fair price point, but he's still rusty. Now, this past week, he went over 300 total yards, but he still looks rusty out there, as it makes sense being off of football for about 2 years. So what do we do with him here? I honestly don't have interest, but the reason why he has to stay and play, if this top 5 quarterback comes back any week now, yeah, he's massively underpriced because of that. But a quarterback I have more interest in is $6,000 Kirk Cousins. I don't get this. Kirk Cousins is mispriced. He has the highest team total on the slate at 26.5. He has a quality matchup, and he's coming off of a week where he just threw for over 400 yards and 28 DraftKings points. This is obviously a clear mispricing. And then you factor in the matchup. The Colts have a quality secondary, but they rank 30th in pass rush, and Kirk Cousins from a clean pocket this year is top 10 in accuracy and efficiency. Yeah, play Kirk Cousins. And one way to get different in these potentially popular stacks of Kirk Cousins is to just stack him with 3 of his teammates, and then you start to get a more unique lineup. And one of those teammates you should consider is TJ Hawkinson, who is a very quality play at $5,000 flat. He's now played 6 games with the Vikings. And in these 6 games, he's averaging nearly 12 fantasy points per game and 8 targets. That is top 5 tight end production since he's joined the Vikings very quietly at just $5,000. Yes, he is somebody you want to play. And so is his teammate Adam Thielen, who's now scored 20 plus points in 2 out of his last 3 games after seeing a bunch of brutal matchups. I mean, look at this. Buffalo, Dallas, New England, the Jets, all top 12 secondaries, and then he finally gets a good one in Detroit, and yeah, he goes for 20 points and finds the end zone on high volume. He's been seeing production every single week. He's top 5 in routes run, so he's not leaving the field. Adam Thielen is a quality play specifically, and really the only spot I'm looking at him is if you're stacking up Minnesota. And now if you want to find a complete punt play in the $3,000 range, this rookie right here, Alec Pierce off the bye, he's sneaking into the 3K range. Despite scoring nearly 20 points the last time we saw him, on 8 targets, he finds the end zone, 80 yards. He's a quality player. He's out there for every single snap these days, and he's explosive. Look, if you're going to start a player in the $3,000 range, you want to have some upside. And he's seen 12 deep targets so far this season, which is top 25 amongst wide receivers. That gives him upside for his price tag. So that's a value at wide receiver. A value at running back, the cheapest I would go is $4,800 James Cook, who, look, he didn't have the greatest game last week, but he still saw 40% of the snaps. That's the second most he's seen on the season. So now in back-to-back weeks, he's seen his 2 highest snap counts, but since he didn't produce like he did the week before, people are less hyped about him. Even though his usage in 40% of the snaps stayed the same. Of course, he only sees 5 touches compared to 20 the week before because the game flow did not go the same. Now, the major concern for James Cook is that this is still a pretty healthy 3-headed backfield. Nyheim Hines is being factored in, especially on passing downs. Devin Singletary is still being used out there, so it's difficult to see him. One week it might happen, but it's difficult to predict when he just starts seeing 60 to 70% of the snaps. So yes, he is limited, he is capped. He's the cheapest I'd go, though, at the running back position. And now we must talk about the Miami backfield because Jeff Wilson left the last game with injury, which means Raheem Mostert at 5,300 would be the clear RB1 of Miami if Wilson was to miss. Now, early in the week, Wilson is considered day-to-day, which is better than week-to-week. He might have a chance to play, but it is a short week on Saturday, so track this news. Mostert in this game ended up playing over 90% of the snaps. Salvon Ahmed only saw 5 snaps in relief of Jeff Wilson, so this would be a good role for Raheem. Now, the problem is, in 7 starts this season, Raheem has only seen about 10 fantasy points on 15 touches per game, not even catching 2 balls per game, so his upside either way is not that great, especially as an 8-point underdog. But a player who does have some quality upside is $6,100 Amari Cooper, who, look, in his first game 2 weeks ago with Deshaun Watson, he sees 9 targets. That's great. But then this past week, he only sees 5, so now his price point is dropping, and so is people's interest in him. Even though Amari Cooper is still great, top 10 in targets, he's third amongst every receiver in the league at beating man coverage, he is still fantastic. So I'm playing Amari, and I've already taken him over 55.5 receiving yards. I've taken Michael Pittman over 58.5 receiving yards. This is done on Prize Picks. You can check it out as well. And you could take this one or any other props that you want for these games on prizepicks.com with a free bet up to $100. A free bet, Sal? Yes, indeed. You click the link in the description below and you use the code SAL22, SAL22, to get a free bet up to $100. Simply put, if you put in $20, they give you 20 right back. All the way up to 100, you put in 100, you're a heavy hitter, a kingpin, a head honcho, you get $100 Rooskies right back. You can check it out with the link in the description below. So we started the show talking about an expensive running back in Jonathan Taylor, and then there's another one here in Dalvin Cook who's also a solid play because he's below $7,000. And Dalvin Cook right now has as elite of a role as any running back in the league. You're looking at 89, 83, and 85% of the snaps. Hell, if a running back sees 65 to 70%, that's considered really good now. He's seeing nearly 90%. And last week, his day was salvaged by finding the end zone. He wasn't all that efficient and effective, but that Lions defense is playing a lot better as of late. But Cook has everything you want. He's ran the second most routes amongst running backs, so he's out there for targets. targets and target potential, the 4th most red zone touches, so he has touchdown potential, and then he's top 5 in overall touches amongst running backs this year. He's a great play, and yes, he is fine to stack up with his quarterback, Kirk Cousins. And let's close out these expensive running backs with $7,400 Nick Chubb, who, look, he's coming off of 2 bad weeks. If we look at this, he hasn't topped 10 points in 3 out of the last 4 games, 8 points in back-to-back weeks. As the most expensive running back, you can expect him to be lower owned here. Even though this dude is still a bad man, 2nd most broken tackles, he is 3rd in juke rate. He's created on his own, independent of his offensive line, the 6th most yards in the league. And the last time he faced Baltimore, who is a quality defense for sure, well, he ended up putting up over 100 total yards. Now, these top 3 price running backs, it's not always the case, but they're the 3 best plays in the slate. Sometimes a cheaper guy has a lot of upside. No, these 3 guys are the 3 best running back plays in the slate. Now, earlier we mentioned that Justin Jefferson might be the best pay-up wide receiver, but there's some other guys here, and one of those guys is Stefon Diggs, who is only $8,100. Stefon Diggs, let me remind you, right now is top 3 in cheat code targets amongst wide receivers. That's his deep targets and his red zone targets. He has 41 of those so far in the year. At $8,100, Stefon Diggs right now, drumroll please, is he the best wide receiver amongst these pay-up options? But is it Justin Jefferson? Well, we'll have to first discuss this next player. And that's Tyreek Hill, who's $9,000, saw 24 points in a bad game last week off of that fluke fumble return for a touchdown, but he has 33 targets over the last 3 games, 11 per game, and that's not fluky. And he's seen elite usage, 30 deep targets so far this season, over 2 per game is not something to take lightly. This creates a lot of upside for you, and at $9,000, is he the best wide receiver play on the slate? The answer is no. The best pay-up wide receiver on this slate is indeed Mr. Justin Jefferson, and yeah, hell yeah, he's expensive. So one way to potentially afford him is to go off the board and say, hey, let's play Matt Ryan, who's a slight underdog at just $5,200, and he has a nice team total of 22.5. When you're a slight underdog with a good team total, it usually means more points. Don't expect a lot of points, maybe 16, 17 points for Ryan here, but he allows you to afford all these expensive running backs and a Justin Jefferson. Now, maybe you don't want to go that route and it's completely fine and you want to just pay up at your quarterback position. Well, if that's the case and you're going with Josh Allen, it makes sense. He has a nice team total of 25 points. He faces a poor secondary. Miami ranks 25th in coverage so far this year, and earlier in the season, Josh Allen had no problems with this secondary. He threw for 400 yards, got some yards on the ground, and had over 30 DraftKings points. So yeah, if you want to pay up for Josh Allen, you're gonna have to find value, likely at the wide receiver position, and there's a lot of it, especially in that 5K range. It just comes down to your overall priorities and interests. I'd rather take the ceiling of a Kirk Cousins or a Josh Allen over trying to get 17 points out of Matt Ryan. Now, one way to be able to afford Josh Allen is cheaper stacking options, and Dawson Knox at $3,900 allows you to do that. Now, there's good news and bad news for Knox. The good news is, look at his route rate. How many times he's out there for a passing play? 76%, 83%, 89%, and 90% last week. I mean, this is elite usage. It led to 7 targets last week. But the problem is, in week 3 when they faced Miami, he saw a season low 54% of the routes. He wasn't out there for that many routes when they were passing. He was staying into block more against a top 5 pass rush in Miami. Now, maybe this was just a 1-week thing, or maybe this was a scheme thing to neutralize their pass rush. And if that's the case, well, this is a concern for Dawson Knox. But keep in mind, earlier in the season, the Bills' offensive line was banged up. They've gotten a little bit healthier since then, so there is some risk here for Knox, but he is cheap. Now, a player that there is risk on, but there's way more upside, who's also cheap for Josh Allen to stack with, is Gabe Davis at $5,000, who I believe is a top 5 wide receiver play in the slate because he's so dang cheap. And he continues to just lead this team in snaps and routes run for Buffalo. And look, if you're out there that much, eventually you're going to find weeks where you pop off. Because look, Gabe Davis hasn't been great this year. His target rate, how many times you're being targeted per route, your ability to earn targets, 79th amongst all receivers. That's not great. But what I like is his routes run. He's running 34 to 35 routes per week with Josh Allen in this offense. All it takes is 1 or 2 plays, as we've seen this season with Davis, when earlier this year he was a wide receiver 1 overall. So Davis is a really quality play, and if you want to see exactly every single player's projections, their ownerships on Lineup Optimizer, and where I'm going with every single one of my lineups, my exposures, well then check out the DFS blueprint that is going to be linked down below in the description. In this blueprint, you'll get access to every single NFL tool that I have for DFS and betting, and a whole lot more for every other sport if you're interested in NBA, DFS, and betting, PGA, UFC, and more. So if you want to join the thousands of people right now using the DFS blueprint to stop losing and win more, well, click the link in the description to learn more. Best of luck on Saturday, you beautiful people.